Hello again, everybody. This is James Bartley, and you're watching and listening to the Cosmic Switchboard Show. Today, our very special guest is Tony Sayers. Tony has had me as a guest on his show before, and I've really enjoyed becoming friends with Tony. He's very switched on. He has a wide understanding of a variety of issues, not just surface level issues either. And we'll have Tony's website and his dedicated YouTube channel linked onto our website and our YouTube channel as well. So without any further ado, Tony Sayers, welcome to the Cosmic Switchboard Show.
Yeah, hi James. Thanks for getting up so early for me in Australia. I appreciate that. It's really early. Just shows how dedicated you are, man.
Thank you. That's one of the things about, and you've gone through this too, being a podcaster, is sometimes all these time zone differences do my head in, and sometimes I get it wrong, you know. And so,
well, you get it worse because you're in Australia, so you're like the other end of the world. So
oh yeah. Everything is topsy turvy. It's, you know, daytime here, nighttime everywhere else, and the day before on top of that. So, Tony, tell us, our listeners and viewers, a bit about yourself and how you came along this journey and the different milestones that brought you to this point.
Oh wow, what a ride! Where to start? Okay, well, if we start at the very beginning. My awakening was out of boredom, really. It was about 5 years ago, and I was working in a stressful job in sales in real estate back in the day. And I remember the turning point. I got back about like 8 o'clock in the evening, some ridiculous time. I started at 8 o'clock in the morning. I was a manager, and I think I'd had an argument with my boss, and you know, I just got back, and I remember I just walked into my kitchen, and I remember the moment to this day, and I just looked up in the sky, like the air, and I was just like, there's got to be more to life than this. I really feel like I'm just existing, I'm not living, which was actually the title for my book in the end. But yeah, so it was weird. I put that. I guess that's a kind of intention, and then, you know, from there, like, I would stumble across David Icke videos, and you know, it was just like the universe was answering me and saying, yeah, you're right, there is more to your life than just real estate, and you know, the floodgates opened with all this information, and you know, like everyone, you know, you go on this journey, and then when I'd come to the conclusion that they're actually trying to poison us and all this stuff, you know, then you make the decision. I think everyone has a decision to make at that point. Am I going to hold this knowledge to myself and keep it to myself, or am I going to warn others? And you know, at the time I thought, well, all my friends and family are going to think I'm crazy, blah blah blah. But I decided to you know, to go with it, and that's what I've been doing, like, since that day. I started Facebook groups, and I've organised march against Monsanto's in London, and done radio shows, podcasts, written books, and you know, it's turned into my passion, probably like yourself. You know, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because you see the horrors taking place, and whereas before, perhaps, you know, war was just something that we always had, but now you really feel the people that are involved in it, and you know, you see the deception behind it. So it is a double-edged sword waking up. But yeah, so I was quite vocal then. I'm still vocal now about 3D level stuff, but really my work turned metaphysical around 2015. I've explained this story before, but basically, long story short, I'd become quite outspoken about the military and things like that, and I put a video out, and it went viral, and I got a lot of psychic attacks from military, death threats, that kind of stuff, and yeah, I ended up felt like I was walking around a soup for months and months on end, and I was trying detoxes, and you know, I knew it must have been linked to that somehow, but I didn't quite understand metaphysics like I understand them now. And so anyway, it led on from there, and someone that I know suggested removing some overlays and implants, part of that being chakras. And partly out of desperation, and because I tried everything, I kind of went with it. And anyway, the next day this cloud had lifted, and so from there I was like, right, I need to learn how to do that. I need to talk about this stuff. I really need to like go deep with it, because this is where the issues really lie, in the metaphysical. And so yeah, I learned how to do that, and coming across overlays. And then I found that through clearing my own energy, my own kind of psychic abilities increased as you remove the interference and all of that stuff. So I started tuning into clairvisually implants on people, working with people, and then seeing kind of different layers and tech and algorithms and things like that. And then from there, it's kind of working out that essentially it's as above, so below. It's universal law of correspondence. What the tech that's coming out now with the chips, the brain implants, a lot of the algorithms and viruses that computers have, and that they're starting to hijack us with, are already there in the etheric. And so it's been a journey of, you know, really going into that, working with clients and finding new stuff, and just clearing the layers of interference on people, which is allowing them to have a certain level of energetic freedom. You know, I don't profess to have the Holy Grail, or I don't profess to pull people out of the Matrix or anything like that. But the feedback I've had is, you know, people are feeling good shifts, and removing a lot of that stuff is really helping people. So metaphysically, I've gone down this road of, you know, removing a lot of etheric interference, cords, you know, things like that. And yeah, so that's where I kind of am now. But at the same time, I'm still got my head in the physical, and I've got my eyes on what's going on where you are, which is absolutely tragic, obviously, over in Australia with the fires, and researching psychotronic weapons, you know, direct energy weapons, trying to raise awareness around that. Also diet as well. I got tripped up with the vegan diet, and so I've been looking into that and talking about that a little bit. So yeah, I just, like, I'm sure it's exactly the same with you. You just consume yourself with just trying to help and open people's eyes to what's going on, and just help whatever way you can. And so that's the really short version of how I got to where I am today.
Without going into too much detail, because you indicated that there had been like problems in the past around this subject, but what about your research and investigations into the military that you feel led to the interference?
See, what I feel that was, I mean, it could be some kind of energy weapon, but what I think it was, because social media is again, there's a double-edged sword with it. You have the opportunity to raise awareness, to open people's eyes, to spread information. But as you know yourself, James, you know about this, like the kind of trolling and all that stuff, and the hate that goes on there is that can leave energetic imprints and psychic imprints and stuff like that. So what I believe happened to me was, because this video, it got out to about 40,000 people overnight. I just woke up and I had an inbox full of death threats from all these military, right? And I perceive it as it was actually a mass psychic attack from lots of military personnel that had seen this video. And of course, those psychic attacks stick on a person's energy field. So this is what was going on, I think, rather than an actual. I don't necessarily think it was an actual direct military attack. It was more, I think, a lot of social media hate for speaking my mind.
Well, we know from a energetic, metaphysical standpoint that the intentions and the intent behind such mouth-foaming hate is in itself a directed energy attack. And that is itself the basis of invocations, of of ritual where these bad intentions and bad mojo is being directed against somebody. And some of these people, in fact, probably many of them that were directing all that rage at you themselves were probably entity infested, probably tied up in knots with all kinds of cords and all kinds of archontic energetic connections. So the internet being what it is, direct electromagnetic conduit, yes. And I've been on the receiving end of that too, with these real hateful people just meeting out all this rage and hatred to you. You feel it right here in the heart center.
Yeah, absolutely. It's become a place. I mean, everyone, there's so many unhealed people out there, and I'm not saying that I'm healed at all. I've still got a lot to do, but it's kind of a place where people come to project as well, and projecting their inner turmoil. And this is again a double-edged sword with this quote unquote truth movement. I think it's become, and I think in the early days, I could have been guilty of this as well. It's become a place where people can kind of express their anger out at the world, because they're kind of justified. Okay, they're doing this, they're doing that to us. They're poisoning our food and water. So, I'm just going to project our vomit. And so maybe we need to, and again, include myself, we have to look at maybe how we do some of this, because sometimes I think we can be feeding these archontic forces that are, just outside our visible sight. So maybe we can disagree with each other, but not in such a toxic fashion.
And what happens, Tony, as you've seen, is how individuals wind up becoming like these lightning rods for extreme emotions. Excuse me. That runs the whole spectrum of almost nirvana on one hand, the savior programming kicking in. On the other hand, this extreme rage, the person's a shill, et cetera, et cetera. And we're seeing that today in Australia, where Max Egan, veteran investigator who's done yeoman's work as far as exposing a lot of this stuff, the fires, the false flags, the smart grid, the directed energy, he got zapped recently. And then, you would expect some degree of empathy, some degree of compassion for the guy, because clearly something had happened to him if one watches the video and does analysis of it. And then, instead of, there was a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy that was engendered by what had gone on with Max. But on the other hand, there were some people that were just piling on the hate. It's like, give the guy a break, he just tapped electromagnetically. And there's nothing simpler, as than taking over someone's cognitive and speech centers remotely. It happens all the time.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I was watching those videos of Max, and I've met him a couple of times, and it was very unlike him to just shift like he did. And when you look at what he was exposing the week before, I think he hit the mainstream media at some point, correct me if I'm wrong, and then all of a sudden he gets this light, and it's really unbelievable what's going on. And someone that's dedicated their whole life, and he's getting older, and you would have thought that there would have been a little bit more compassion for him in that sense. So yeah, there's a lot of projecting, and I think we shouldn't ignore what's going on, and we should always seek to shine the light on dark. But it's also making sure that we shine the light on our own darkness and working through our own layers. And that's not easy. It can take years. And but it sounds cliche, but perhaps the world is in trauma, and because we are to some extent. And I think that if you're only kind of speaking out against the system, then you're missing a whole other area which needs to be dealt with. And likewise, if you're just focusing on self, then you fall into this new age doctrine of it's all about me and your own journey and nothing else matters. Then you're also in that camp. So it's just finding that balance of the middle ground in that regard.
Absolutely. What I found, and this is by no means a criticism for those who through good intentions, do their level best to expose what's going on in the surface world. But what happens sometimes is that when people get in that mode, you know, they lower their head like a ram or like a bull, and they charge headlong at these immovable edifices of control. When I feel that the real struggle, which you're involved with, Tony, is what's going on in the inner planes, what's going on metaphysically, what's going on energetically. So there has to be an understanding that things manifest in the spiritual world, the spirit world, before they manifest in the physical world. And you made a brilliant point earlier about how a lot of these technologies that have been rolled out for some time now, part of the control apparatus, they first manifested as thoughts, as things in the spiritual world and literally in other dimensions. So when we look at it from that standpoint, bashing our head against this immovable object, whatever agency or whatever institution, seen or unseen on the surface, if some people want to do that, I'm not going to be critical of them. You know, hats off to them. But that's a tough road to hoe, Tony, because they're going to be hit on all sides, not only by the physical 3D security apparatus, but as you pointed out earlier, these directed energy emotions and directed energy weapons, like what happened to Max, the whole 9 yards. There's a way to operate, there's a way to work without drawing a bullseye on your chest.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, so much of it is because I think what we're doing to a certain extent is that I describe it as we're shouting at the movie, hoping the movie will change, whereas perhaps we need to go behind the projector and change the movie from there. But, you know, it makes me wonder, you know, how much time we're expending on that side of things, how far we're getting with it.
Well, a case in point, you know, perception is reality. And the fires that have been going on in Australia have been absolutely tragic, especially as far as the wildlife is concerned, like the countless poor animals that have been vanquished as a result of these fires. And there's no doubt in my mind that some of them have been deliberately set up, and it's created a problem, reaction, solution scenario like David Icke talks about. But the perception part comes in for people who aren't in the affected areas, and especially for the viewers abroad, internationally, where if they have family and friends in Australia, they're made to think and feel by the corporate media that their family and friends are directly affected, that we're huddled on a beach somewhere waiting for the Navy to pick us up. And I liken it to the mass trauma inflicted on the world viewing audience with 9/11. We're just hypnotically again and again, the towers coming down over and over. And we have a similar dynamic where these brush fires, and they're making stuff up now, Tony. It's like, you know, dry thunderstorms, dry lightning, just making things up that never existed before. And they're being almost like in talismanic invocation fashion, repeated over and over and over by the news presenters. Once again, dry lightning was the cause of this fire, right? And so people abroad are watching all these horrific scenes of all this fire and all this carnage and the sky all pink and red, and they're thinking, oh my goodness, my family and friends over there, you know, I haven't heard from them in the last half hour. What's happened to them? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's crazy. I think didn't they measure the morphogenic field or some kind of electromagnetic field after 9/11, and there was a huge spike, and I think they like to create these huge spikes of fear and panic. It's all their energy, isn't it? It's all chaos energy, and we know that these entities and these you know, the things working in the fourth dimension, they feed off of all this fear and hate and anger, but it just seems to me like you can really see how this spiritual war is really coming to a head. You know, like we were speaking off air, like just after Christmas. I mean, we had the fires where you are. Like there's been so much happen in like first month. It's like, you know, but I always quite kind of try and reframe it, because, you know, people are waking up, but they're getting more desperate to push these things through quickly. And, you know, in that sense, and I see it through my own work as well, how panicked these entities get, you know, people when they come for sessions and they'll try and hijack people. You probably had it yourself when you've done work like this, and Skype will go down, and, you know, so I think there's a huge panic in all dimensions from that end. And when you look at it on a 3D level, you can think, wow, you know, we're really in the, you know, in the dirt here with what's going on. But if you can reframe it, and when you kind of understand it on a higher perspective, I think they're really panicking. You know, they're trying to shut down social media, they're trying to shut down YouTube. You know, God knows how long we're going to be around on YouTube for. So you do see an element of fear from their side. You know, they need to know the outcome of everything, and there's so many people now doing great work, and I always try and remind people of the victories that we've had along the way. I mean, people now I mean, in the UK alone, vaccinations are down. You know, cannabis oil is out there now as a cure. That was from years of people in the alternative. I remember years ago people banging on relentlessly about, you know, the cancer and how it's a scam, all this chemo. You know, they're having to start coming out with mainstream reports really confirming what a lot of alternative media are saying to gain credibility. So, you know, it is chaotic, but I think we need to kind of have sort of calm heads throughout these choppy waters, and concentrate on, you know, doing our own inner work and getting ourselves clean, and rejecting a lot of this stuff. A lot of the answers and solutions come in, you know, just the word no, just saying no to, you know, all their toxic foods. And, you know, we can vote with our dollars. It's a lot of it's easy. We just need to resist.
Opt out.
Opt out. Yeah, exactly.
You know, like, for example, it baffles me, and I come from a place of non-judgment, Tony, and there's a degree of sadness too when I see someone next to me munching out on, you know, certain fast foods of which were world famous, and everywhere you go you see these certain fast food restaurants, and it's like, man, it's like the poison you're putting into your body. Ants even reject this stuff because they don't recognize it as food, right?
Yeah.
So when you can recognize it and then still keep it at arm's length, not let it become, you know, take it on board your energy field, that's part of the work. And what I'd like to know also, Tony, is in your energetic work, what parts, you know, looking with the etheric third eye vision, what parts of the energetic body field and the anatomy seem to be impacted, where you see a lot of these connections and plugins and sometimes literal entities of one stripe or another?
Yeah, I
and
mean,
how it affects people, just to interject as I can, emotionally, as far as their decision-making process, as far as amping up their fear, you know, because they seem to be placed in certain regions of our energy field in our bodies to engender certain effects, illness, and what have you.
Yeah. I mean, from what I've discovered in my work, there's a huge amount of all kinds of different technology that is infused in our biological makeup. You're talking hybrid technology, bionic, mechatronic, robotic. Then you have all the psychotronic stuff, the mind control technology, mind reading, voice to skull, you know, God's voice technology, laser technology. And then you have, you know, the implants, which obviously target key areas of the body. There's a lot around the heart, the pineal gland, chips, and, you know, it sounds horrific, but again, reframing it. So you have all this AI tech, and then you have all these entities that are trying to hijack, and then you have other humans' energies, psychic attacks, and all that stuff going on. Then you got the 3D level where they're trying to poison us and all that stuff. But, you know, imagine all that and we're still functioning. Imagine how truly powerful we really are, you know. And I think, you know, when I talk about these things, I always try and remind people that we're targeted in such a way because we are absolutely hugely powerful batteries. And you know, as soon as we can realize that as well, and on a deep level, subconscious collective level, that we are powerful beings, you know, that's half the battle won, because there exists a collective consciousness of not feeling worthy, not feeling good enough, not thinking that we have any power to change, or things are just the way they are. I think a big step forward would be if people could just really wake up from that illusion, because through the work that I do, I can see how much they've messed with us, but at the same time, why they've messed with us. And when we're on this human race that we see at the moment is no way a representation of what we truly are, truly can be. I believe we're absolute genius, telepathy, teleportation, all these wonderful psychic abilities across the board. But of course, we're not taught about energy at all. We're put down from basically as soon as we're young to just, accept authority and to appeal to authority. And so, we have to really educate the next generation with what they truly are, and instill some kind of self-belief.
That's what I would like to see, Tony. The next generations coming after us to be the standard bearers, to be the torchbearers, to keep us moving in that direction where we detach from all these many levels of control and fulfill our destiny. We are originally a spacefaring race, a race that spans dimensions, a race that has a destiny to fulfill, which involves helping others that are under a similar form of oppression. I feel I don't think it's just our job is half done if we break out, but then we just go, okay, well, we're just headed off to fifth dimensional, never-ending bliss. But then we just turn a blind eye to all this other suffering throughout the cosmos and the multiverse. I believe that at least some of us feel that there's a lot of work to be done, not just on our world, but elsewhere. So when you frame it from that perspective, and what you just pointed out, we have had a lot of successes. I feel, and this is coming from a glass half full perspective, even what's happened to Max Egan, and more power to him, and I hope he gets a lot better. He's going to take a backseat for a while and regroup and recover. But the fact that they had to go to that extreme level to silence him for all the work he's been doing, and we're feeling that too, because you've had hits on your YouTube channel. I've had hits on my YouTube channel. I've had videos censored for hate speech, right? And all that. But like you point out, those are manifestations of fear. Those are manifestations of a sense of loss of control. And I think at some point we're all going to make, or many of us are going to make the choice, who needs YouTube? We're going to find some other platform. We've got enough of a following now. We don't need YouTube. But right now it's just kind of a convenient thing, however inconvenient it's starting to be. So I do see a lot of successes in the recent past. And also the fear mongering and what they managed to do is the ancient kind of beating of the war drums, Tony, and how so many people who should know better, right? That programming is kicked in, and it's like, wave the red, white, and blue. Great on you, Trump, for killing this terrorist. And again, it's an inversion of reality, because this guy Soleimani was wiping out the CIA, Mossad, NATO-backed ISIS, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, whatever you want to call them, all these whack job jihadists that have been sent out all over the place to destabilize all these secular and moderate Arab countries, right? So they wipe out the one guy who's doing the most to stop all that, and then they spin it all around. Oh, look, we've gotten, and they're even saying, Tony, that, oh, he was part of 9/11 too, right? Never mind the Iranian, Shia Persian dichotomy and difference between the Sunnis and the alleged Wahhabists the Wahhabists that were blamed for 9/11, because those distinctions are meaningless to most people. They're just a bunch of ragheads, a bunch of terrorists, because that's what we've been told for so long. So they're even saying the Soleimani guy was involved with 9/11, right? And if that is not a red flag to say this whole narrative is nonsense, we're being dragged kicking and screaming into a bigger war. Now, the things you said somehow not surprisingly, pissed off a lot of these military types. You know, what can you tell them? Look, you guys are the ones that are going to be at the sharp end if you're dragged kicking and screaming off to another wider war. And it's like, what kind of message you want to tell these people? Because I don't think they have any idea. This is not some little country that the U.S. can just bitch slap into submission. The Iranians have smart minds. They have smart torpedoes. They have the money to buy any kind of technology they want from China and Russia. And it's not going to be a pretty sight of what goes on in the Persian Gulf and around the world too.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we try and get into the minds of the military. I mean, the irony is, I mean, I hate to say it, but the abuse I got was really low, like, you know, low level intelligence, insulting my mom and things like that. And I'm there and I'm like, hang on, you supposedly fight for my freedom to express my opinion. So just because it's different to yours, that shouldn't mean that you bombard me with death threats. So they're a little bit of an oxymoron unto themselves, and obviously, as we know, heavily brainwashed. And the main thing with getting through to the military, and they hate to hear it like this, is that people still refer to them as heroes. The masses, you know, they're going to desert areas and bombing like goat farmers with high-tech weaponry, and then shooting off in their airplane, like, you know, knocking on someone's door, then running away. And you know, they come back home and the general public glorify and blow smoke up their backsides, and of course they revel in it. The ego likes it, and so trying to get them to the real solution with military, I think, is to the people have got to stop you know, glorifying what these people are doing, because essentially, as we know, it's an organized satanic ritual, which, you know, is causing chaos and a lot of energy to feed on from these entities behind the scenes. So you know, it really needs to stop the whole glorification, and only when we all say, look, do you know what, fighting in the military is not heroic, then maybe they'll stop and think about what they're actually doing. But from first-hand knowledge, we've got some work to do on that respect, because they're adamant that they're doing good, and they don't really care about who and why they're going to do this work for. They don't care about their agendas. Their whole idea is, well, it's just following orders. I don't get involved in that. That's what I heard a lot, and really that's a childish mindset, considering that you're going to be going into a battlefield and potentially like killing someone. So, you know, there's a lot of work to be done on that.
Yes, and if they would just stop and look at what's happened to veterans since all these ruinous 9/11 wars have started, so many of them wind up, because in the military, as you know, especially the combat units, they're basically ordered to take all these psychotropic drugs that make them even more aggressive, and then combine that, layer that on top of all the indoctrination and what even the SAS refer to as programming the lizard part of the brain, making them really aggressive, making them really angry, and to the point where they just dehumanize everyone that they're told to kill. And so many of these people in uniform today, it was a smooth transition, a seamless transition from playing violent shoot-'em-up video games. Now they're doing the real thing. And so many of them get pilled up by their own army and military psychiatrists. So many of them, after their military careers, are homeless. And ironically, they get beaten up and shot and killed by these psychopath police officers, especially in America. And you look at the bizarre contradiction and dichotomy at work, Tony, where, okay, they're going to go out and they're going to blow up all these Middle Eastern, Near Eastern countries, and yet the Coudenhove-Kalergi plant is flooding their own countries, their own backyard, with these same people. Well, not the same people, but actually more radicalized people, the ones that they're supposed to be going after. And they wake up one fine morning, and their local councils are Sharia councils, their mayors are Sharia councils. Everything is kind of topsy-turvy. And they don't see the contradiction that they're going to protect us and protect our freedoms in these other countries by blowing everything up and killing people. But here in their own backyard, everything is going to hell in a handbasket. Everything is becoming Orwellian, and you know what? They're responsible for this. Yeah. And thankfully, there are enough military, ex-military, ex-intelligence people that are speaking out about this, and there's quite a lot of them. People like Wayne Madsen and people like that. I mean, they do yeoman's work in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think uniforms in general have got a lot to answer for. I always say, you know, you give someone a uniform and something goes to their head, right? It's unbelievable. This is funny. I went when I was living in London. I said earlier I organised this march against Monsanto. I don't know if you've been to London, but you obviously, you know, it's a busy city, lots of traffic, that kind of stuff. Anyway, the organisers, or one of the organisers, gave a couple of us this orange bib. It was just an orange bib, you know, one of those. Mate, I could go around all the streets, stopping all the traffic, every you know, all the main roads. I was just and like they don't even. And I thought, my God, I've just got this bib on, and like automatically people just, you know, completely bow. And I've never
worn Clockwork Orange, you know. They've been empowered to go around and just bully boy people, you know.
Yeah, it's amazing how people just, you know, give their power away like that. And I was like, God, I could cause chaos in this traffic today. And I was almost tempted to do it through curiosity and to document it. But, you know, and just people look at you with a completely different respect because I had this orange bib on. And yeah, so it's crazy, isn't it? And it's the same with the police, and you look at them and they it's almost like when they haven't got the uniform on, they're a completely normal person, and they put this like Superman outfit on, and they completely switch into a different character, and they lose all their humanness. They lose. It's really bizarre. I think they did an experiment about it. I forget what it was called, where you know, they put these people in with uniforms and with a crowd of people, and they measured which ones would just completely give their power away. And the results were pretty telling in that. I forget what it was called, but it's crazy, isn't it? Get dressed up in a fancy dress costume and think you're something special.
Well, they had it's well known in the field. Excuse me. I think I can't remember where it was done at, Stanford or some other place, but they had two control groups. One was the warders, the prison guards, and this was all like play acting, right? And the other were the prisoners. And before too long, you probably know about this, Tony, before too long, the ones who played the role of the prison guards, the power just went to their heads. They became sadistic. They began meting out all these, you know, Guantanamo, you know, style punishments, these Abu Ghraib style punishments to the people who were playing the prisoners, and many of them meekly rolled over and said, okay, uncle, right, you're the boss. And so there's almost to do with the way that the numerology and the algorithm set up in this reality, Tony, where almost from like a talismanic perspective, a uniform imbues its wearer with some sort of power, some kind of authority. And then you look at the judges with their black Saturn cult robes, and you know, you see all the policemen and all the cars decked out in the Freemasonic garb and stuff. And to your average person, that doesn't mean anything. Like, for example, I lived in San Diego for a long time, and you walk down there by the courts, and you walk down there by the city hall and all those types of buildings and the federal buildings, and the numbers of the buildings, 9033, you know, when you look at them, and then you do the inversions of the numbers, and then you turn a 6 into a 9, a 9 into 6, and you add the 3s, and man, everywhere you look down there, there's 6s and 666s, right? It doesn't mean anything to your average passersby, but from an energetic standpoint and what has been put in energetically, ritually, and everything else behind it to create that edifice of control and power, yes, it means something. And when you walk into those buildings, you know, the whole vibe, everything changes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the human mind can be quite fragile if it's not used properly. And you know, this ties in with like, you know, keeping our own energy clean as well. I think at the moment it's really important. I go on about it in my channel a lot, you know, rejecting the poisons that we know, you know, are opening us up to certain, you know, entities and things like that. We make our job harder for ourselves sometimes. But yeah, I mean, talking of algorithms as well, one of the algorithms and actually Google it, actually exists. We have running through this divide and conquer algorithm, which is interesting when you consider that this whole reality is based around divide and conquer. You know, black versus white, rich versus poor, England versus France, and so on and so forth. It's interesting that actually runs through us. So yeah, there's so much going on. It's unbelievable, really.
Now, you're an expat. There's many out there. What were the steps, you know, mentally, the thought processes that eventually, you know, compelled you to leave, you know, old Blighty and move to where you're at now? And tell us what it's like, the vibe. Where, you know, you don't have to be specific exactly where you're at, but in general, where you're at. You know, what seems to be the mood of the people and all that.
Well, I left the UK because it was too bloody cold. No, there was more to it than that. I've always had a desire. I've always travelled all throughout my life. You know, when I left school, I was 21. I went around the world. I came to where you are, Australia, and did the whole East Coast thing, and you know, Asia, backpacking, and it's really enriched my life. You know, seeing how other cultures operate, and I've managed to, you know, throughout my travels, really get a handle on how people are mind controlled differently in certain areas. I mean, you look at places like Japan and Hong Kong, and how it's all about tradition, respecting elders, and you know, so the youngsters coming through, they can't do anything unless the teacher or the elder agrees with it. So they're very much indoctrinated with that, and then obviously you go to the West, and it's football and beer and sport and, you know, distractions, and then in other places you have religions, and so everywhere, every part of the world has their own kind of mind control, you know, primary mind control. And yeah, so yeah, I decided a long time ago that I wanted to live abroad, but because you know, I was caught up in the matrix, I didn't do it. I kept putting it off, and then eventually I think I hit 33 or something, 34, and I was just like, well, if I don't do it now, then I'll never do it. And so I ended up living in Southeast Asia for a while, as I say, and yeah, it's the weather really for me, and here is very interesting. Mexico is such an interesting place to be. I mean, you have, in terms of energy centers, you have all the pyramids, Chichen Itza, you know, a lot of stuff around that with the Mayan culture. Interestingly enough, we went to Chichen Itza and we did some land clearing there, and we were sick for 2 weeks after we came back. I mean, there's this, they call them cenotes. They're like sinkholes. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're all over the Yucatan Peninsula, where apparently a meteorite hit and, you know, blew holes in the land. But this particular cenote was where they used to throw in the human sacrifices and all that, just outside the Chichen Itza, the main pyramid there, and you've got the sinkhole there, and oh my God, walking around there was like walking around in some kind of energetic soup. So, you know, we were doing some land clearing there, and yeah, like I say, we got flu for 2 weeks when the day after, and so. Energetically, it's a very interesting place. Culturally, they're very into, obviously they're very religious, but they're very in touch with death itself. And there's a lot of them here that actually, you know, they worship the god of death, and a lot of black magic, weird stuff like that. And then of course you've got all the cartels, and you can tell how they've done a job, because it's a very special area in the world energetically, as I say, but you can tell how they've done something here with the frequencies to make, you know, the men are really like, you know, there's that macho culture, you know, with the cartels and things like that. and the drug wars and everything like that. And I find with all these points, these high energy points in the world, they've done some kind of distortion job on it. There's a couple of islands, Ibiza being one, Koh Phangan in Thailand being another, where they've turned these islands, when you go there, you can feel like a special frequency. They've turned them into like party islands, drugs and alcohol, and or they've inverted it with all the new age stuff, the tantric and the yoga centers where all these gurus are, abusing women and stuff like that. So they always, as we said earlier, they're always inverting these special areas of the world, and I think that's no different here. But as a place, it's extremely interesting and really beautiful.
Yeah, like they've imbued this Bacchanalian, Dionysian kind of party till you drop kind of vibe, which definitely feeds certain entities in certain places. And then in other places, like you pointed out, they imbue other kinds of energies which invoke and bring in certain types of entities.
Yeah.
What I've also noticed too in the never-ending dismantling of Iraq, former Babylon, and all that, they made a point, excuse me, of targeting all these ziggurats in the statuary, and well, they've done this before with the Khmer Rouge and with the Taliban, and they just turn them loose to destroy any vestige of the past, any kind of history. They just eradicate it off the face of the earth and destroy everything. But the systematic targeting of ziggurats and pyramids in the Near East, I was thinking, that's some dark stuff there, because a lot of just the basic funerary stuff that goes on in those places, in times past, let alone whatever dark stuff has gone on there too. They're blowing these things apart. And to me, like energetically, metaphysically, that's like uncorking a volcano, right?
Yeah.
And so we already know that places like the Middle East are riven with these big portals and stargates naturally occurring even. I mean, they're even written about in a lot of these ancient texts. And now they're going around systematically blowing up all these ziggurats, and what the hell are they doing? So there's definitely this concept, Tony, of a burnt offering at work, where like Australia, they're just setting all these fires off, and then you're seeing in some of the pictures, this even made it in mainstream, where you see this big entity face in the smoke. That was real.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah,
that was real. They actually had the guy who took the picture on regular mainstream news talking about it, and they just wrote it off as some kind of weird fluke. But we've seen things like that before. So again, it's what we talked about before we started today, this race on the one hand of raising awareness, but also doing the inner work, which is always the most difficult, the inner shadow work. That's where the heavy lifting takes place. And also that on the one hand, and this race with the powers that be that want to install all their instruments of control and oppression and manipulation. And so much of it, as you know, is psychotronic. And we touched on it briefly. I'd like your thoughts on it. What can we do to make the younger generations wake up to this without, being in their face and, going all Alex Jones on them? Because what I see is the indoctrination is happening from day dot. It just, they're being hammered with all this gender confusion and all this this Soviet style programming. So what can we do to rectify that?
Yeah, and I've seen this with the millennials coming through with all the trans stuff. I mean, I've had my own battles with all of this stuff. It's the liberal movement and everything like this. It's really dangerous, and I think what we're living in now is really a time where, as individuals, we got to choose, and we've got to commit. If we're going to go with what's true, we've got to commit to it. And by committing to truth, if you're a parent, I mean, it's extremely difficult. And, my heart really does go out to parents at the moment, especially where you are in Australia with the forced vaccinations and stuff. But, you know, if we're serious, then I think we've got to start, you know, looking at rejecting mainstream education, you know, looking at trying to homeschool it where possible. And if we can't do that, then we need to really be educating our next generations as to what really is going on, because otherwise, what's that saying I heard the other day, that the children are the next fathers or something. I'm terrible on podcasts with remembering quotes, but they're really the next in line. So, and I think it's down to our generation. We're probably the last generation that experienced any kind of freedom at all. I mean, I grew up as a kid in the 80s, and you know, I remember going to parks, all the kids were playing out, you know, life just seemed free. You know, you didn't have this CCTV everywhere. So we know what it's like to have that freedom, that a certain level of freedom. And, you know, we need to really commit to putting out the information that's going to help these kids and educating them as best we can. And, you know, taking the time to, you know, pull them off the internet or their games they're playing, Fortnite or whatever games they're playing, and saying, look, you know all these games you're playing where you're shooting people, that's really not cool. And you know, and just, I think I'm not a parent, so I don't want to come across like I know how to parent, but I just see I try and do it with my niece and nephew. You know, when I see them, I try and give them like little seeds, nuggets, and trying to remind them of things that are really important, which is our world, you know, their children, and how important it is to just simply care about what's going on in the world, because all the stuff, the games that they're playing, you know, the food that they're eating, it desensitizes us and it will desensitize them. So yeah, we've got to be like that last wave of truth that keeps it alive, that keeps the fire burning.
Indeed, and find a way to detach the children from this.
Yeah.
And what they've done also is, especially with adults in the workforce, they've made it almost mandatory for people to have smartphones and Android phones, because so much of their work rosters, so much of their scheduling, so much of their payroll, et cetera, is now done through their phones, right? So for the adults, they've hooked them in even more, where like I would like to just go back to the old-fashioned Nokia, where you can drop it on the ground and hammer it with a sledgehammer and it still works, you know. But it's what they've done is they've made it so that we're utterly reliant upon this thing in so many ways. And what I would like to see more of kids do, young adults, millennials on up into the 40s and 50s and beyond, I'd like to see them read more. I'd like to look over on a train, on a packed train, and notice that I'm not the only one that's reading a book, that there are other people. Instead of, they're literally plugged in to the Borg collective energetically, and the harm that the emissions are doing too. It really is this weird, we talked about this before we started, like waking up in a weird science fiction B movie, right? But at the same time, it's very real. So what we do is we surround ourselves with a bubble of serenity and inner calm and awareness, but not to the point of paranoia, fear, and rage, because that just feeds all these archons that we talked about. Thank you for the outstanding work you've done in that regard, not only raising awareness of what's going on in the 3D, rapidly becoming 4D surface world, but also from energetic inner plane standpoint. We've reached the end of a fascinating first segment. Tony, could you give our listeners information about your website and how they can reach you and find you on YouTube as well?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it's just Tony Sayers on YouTube. Just search my name, and my website is transcendingtimes.org. And all my blogs and work and stuff that I do is all on there. So they're the best ways.
Well, we'll reach the end of the first segment with our guest, Tony Sayers. If you like what we do, if you believe in what we do here at the Cosmic Switchboard Show, please go to our website, sign up and become a member, and we'll see you at the top of the next segment.